Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. Today we are discussing how the Primarch of the Ultramarines Roboute Guilliman feels about each one of his Primarch brothers. Keep in mind today I will be referencing events from across the Warhammer 40k universe and the Horus Heresy series. But with that said, let's waste no time and just jump straight in. Okay, now getting a Primarch's opinion on a brother is a bit of a rare treat in the lore, something we don't come across too often. It's one of those things that gives us so much more understanding, the little pieces of lore nuggets that we crave. There isn't a single brother where we've been blessed with his thoughts regarding all his kin. And a lot will always fall down to your own personal feelings and interpretation, as is always the way when talking lore. However, thanks to Roboute Guilliman's return to the Imperium, his placing as the figurehead character in the current setting, we've received glimpses into his mind and observations of him from others in far more quantities than most other characters. And there are few things more fascinating and intriguing than Guilliman's thoughts and feelings regarding his brothers. So, let's make our way through each of those brothers and see what we can judge. Beginning with the first, Lion L. Johnson. Now, L. Johnson is probably the Primarch we know most about when it comes to Guilliman's opinion, thanks to their time together during the Horus Heresy within Ultramar. As soon as Guilliman was informed the Dark Angels had entered Ultramar, we glimpsed his thoughts regarding L. Johnson within the novel The Unremembered Empire. Of all of them, why did it have to be him who found a way through the storm? Guilliman whispered. Uten pretended she had not heard. She waited patiently. I admire him, Guilliman said, more audibly, looking at his stoic Chamberlain. Throne, who wouldn't? It's impossible not to admire him. But there is always a shadow on him. He dwells in secrets. He plays his cards too close, and he walks by himself when he pleases. There is too much of the wild forest in him. He should be as noble as any of my beloved brothers, but we have never been close, and there is too much about him that is sly. So, a bit of a complex relationship, as most Primarch ones are, to be fair. The admiration for L. Johnson, that aura and enigma of him being the first, even affecting the likes of Guilliman, yet that mistrusting nature, ruling out any real type of brotherhood. And we know through their time together in Ultramar, founding Imperium Secundus, there would be a lot of difficulties. Thanks almost entirely to L. Johnson's need to lie, to keep secrets from his brothers, ultimately disguising an orbital bombardment upon a world of Ultramar in his pursuit of Konrad. A betrayal that beyond infuriated Guilliman and led to L. Johnson's banishment from the Imperium Secundus. Now the legions would work together after, combining their efforts to help Sanguinius reach the throne world. But it's undoubted the scars of this past remain in Guilliman and L. Johnson's relationship. And I think it will always fall back to that initial description. Guilliman admires him, but he struggles to trust him at the end of the day. When we get to that eventual reunion, I have no doubt the two will continue to work together, placing their previous disagreements aside. However, that feeling will remain. Guilliman would never doubt L. Johnson's loyalty, or his ability for that matter. But there will always be the inner doubt on just how he'll go about prosecuting his intention. I'm just not sure that will ever change. However, moving on, next we have Fulgrim. Now, Guilliman's feelings towards Fulgrim probably aren't the best, considering the Phoenician killed him after all. However, prior to that, well, it certainly seems there was a respect there. Within the first Dark Imperium novel, during the flashback of Guilliman's loss to Fulgrim, we received a few glimpses into Guilliman's inner thoughts regarding his brother. The last time Roboute Guilliman had walked the triumphal way, it had been as an honoured guest. The Emperor's children had lined the stairs and landings in their hundreds, and bright light had sparked from their artistry as they saluted him. His brother had greeted him warmly. Guilliman felt a pang of sadness for what might have been. Now, in the murk, he returned like a thief in the night. And then, only Fulgrim's legion had been permitted to display the personal symbol of the Emperor. The irony of the honour weighed heavily on Guilliman's heart. Fulgrim had been pompous, vainglorious, boastful and proud, but his better qualities had outshone those foibles. Examining the wreck of the door hardened Guilliman's heart. So yes, Guilliman was all too aware of the differences in personal taste between him and Fulgrim, quite clearly being more personally reserved. However, it's clear he had respect for Fulgrim, his talent and ability. And there's still that bond of brothers there, that tie, despite the differences. His brother had greeted him warmly. Guilliman felt a pang of sadness for what might have been. And when Guilliman would lay sight on Fulgrim for the first time post-ascension, he would have tears in his eyes at what had happened to his brother, even despite knowing what to expect, having seen vid captures of Fulgrim at the Siege of Terra. So for all their differences, perhaps personal distaste, Guilliman clearly recognised what his brother meant to the Imperium, respected his talent, and cared for him, in a way. Now moving on, next we have Perturabo. There isn't much out there in relation to Perturabo and Guilliman, and it's actually a relationship I think we could see explored within the Scouring series. If we ever get there, of course, as Perturabo and his legion are most definitely one of the harder traitors to displace in the aftermath of the Siege of Terra. And we know Guilliman himself has to come to Rogal's aid against Perturabo during the Iron Cage incident. So I think we could definitely see more of their relationship uncovered and explored in the future. Now, that said, there are a couple of snippets that give us a basis to go by. Within the novel Angel Exterminatus, we got a very brief sentence on how Guilliman praised Perturabo, in how detailed he was with anything he set his mind to. Angron had berated him for wasting time on irrelevant details, while Guilliman had lauded him for his thoroughness. Now, Guilliman appreciating attention to detail is no surprise. He certainly has that quality in spades himself. But there's no hint or reference to a friendship here. Merely fact. Guilliman praising the method. And I think that most likely sums up their relationship. A mutual respect for the talent and ability, the planning nature of the both of them, but no real friendship outside of that. Indeed, within the novel Know No Fear, we got a passage where Guilliman reflects on Perturabo just being a weapon. Some of them don't even pause to consider that is what they are. Angron, Russ, Ferrus, Perturabo, they are just weapons, and have no ambition beyond being weapons. These kind of passages are always a little tricky in the lore, as we can generally get different takes depending on the author, or maybe something will come along after that will counter it. For example, I'm not sure that train of thought necessarily applies to, say, Ferrus, who has created marvels at the Forge, and who was a man very troubled by his son's flesh's weak mindset, planning to deal with it after the Crusade. Very much a mind not just typecast as a weapon. But I guess from Guilliman's point of view, you can see why he might have felt that way about Perturabo. Personality-wise, I doubt the Hammer of Olympia would have discussed much with Guilliman outside the Crusade, though with Magnus we saw the more personal side of Perturabo. It does take two to tango, and it probably needed the more flamboyant personality of Magnus to allow Perturabo to open up. Guilliman was renowned to be pretty boring, so maybe it was a bit of a clash in being too similar with Perturabo. Combine that with Perturabo's bluntness, I could quite easily see it as a working relationship, and not much else. The two could probably prosecute a fantastic campaign alongside each other, but they probably wouldn't have much fun in doing it. But at the end of the day, it could simply boil down to distaste. Guilliman simply not liking his brother, as his reflection in Dark Imperium Godblight is a little more brutal. He was like Perturabo in that regard. Selfish, self-obsessed, cynical. Now, it does have to be said that is pretty cutting, especially for Guilliman. But moving on to the Kargan, Jaghatai Khan. Now, Jaghatai was infamous for being unknowable. It was really the role he was created for, to be the wild card, the unpredictable factor. He spent virtually no time on Terra, clashing with his father and Malcador regarding the Imperial truth. And then he immediately took his legion off to the far reaches of the galaxy, where he largely remained for the rest of the Great Crusade. So he was largely a mystery to most of his brothers, even though they all must have met him at some point. Even the Primarchs he got on with, namely Magnus, Horus and Sanguinius, could only say they knew so much about him. So it's not exactly a surprise there's virtually nothing written on his relationship with Roboute Guilliman. However, there are a few clues that can leave us with a reasonable assumption. During the novel The Unremembered Empire, a White Scars task force arrives to Macragge, seeking safety from the Ruinstorm, and Guilliman welcomes them openly, not appearing to doubt them at all, even engaging in conversation with the White Scars leader, who comes with his sword drawn, but one hand open, wanting to ensure Guilliman's intent. So it definitely appears to reveal a level of respect that Guilliman held for Jaghatai and his legion, most definitely not disregarding or doubting of Jaghatai's sons. And then within Dark Imperium, as Guilliman falls with his throat slit by Fulgrim, one of his final thoughts is what Russ or Jaghatai will do without him. Now, no, that's not necessarily for personal reasons, and most likely not for personal reasons, more likely duty and temperament, or that Russ and Jaghatai may simply be the last two brothers remaining, However, still, it at least shows some manner of concern for Jaghatai. And throughout the Siege of Terror, Jaghatai appeared convinced that Guilliman was going to come, that it was never in doubt, even when it appeared too late to matter. Still, Jaghatai spoke of Guilliman's arrival, a big reason in his retaking of the Lion Gate spaceport, so Guilliman's troops could quickly make planetfall. And Jaghatai would later support Guilliman's implementation of the Codex as well. Now, it is worth a mention, Jaghatai did disagree with L. Johnson and Guilliman's tactics in the Heresy, feeling the two of them should have kept pushing for Terra alongside Sanguinius. But while there's clearly no personal friendship between the two, or particular fondness between them, it's clear there was definitely some manner of mutual respect, even for nothing else but for their loyalty. Moving on, next up we have Leman Russ. Though we have no first-hand personal interactions between the two, we actually have a fair few references made by them about the other. Russ, as you might expect, found Guilliman pretty dull. Within Wolfsbane, when speaking about Rogal, we got the comment, "We do get on. I respect him. Hell, I like him. But he is a different man to me. And his methodology plucks at my nerves after so long a stay. Only Guilliman and Perturabo are more boring than he is." And we know this difference in personality was as equally stark from Guilliman's point of view. As we discussed with Perturabo, Guilliman struggled to see where Russ would fit in, outside of war, feeling that Russ only saw himself in that way, and that was expanded upon a little within Unremembered Empire. He's probably almost grateful. No. Strike that. It's too harsh a judgment even for Russ, even as a joke. But Russ must wonder, mustn't he, about the peacetime that will someday follow this. What will his purpose be? He believes that his legion exists to sanction those who become problems to the Imperium. Does he fear that one day that will be him and his kind? That he will face the sanction for being too wild and dangerous for a civilized culture to accept. So we get a little revelation here of how Guilliman doesn't truly know Russ, that he's being kept at arm's length by the savage mask the Wolf King wears, which, as I've said before, is something I feel Russ did very intentionally, as part of his role as executioner, keeping his brothers at arm's length. But there's clearly a respect there too, as Guilliman would later comment. He's a barbarian, he said, but he is still a king, and he is loyal in ways that shame us all. And we know Guilliman had Russ within his choice of dauntless few, the Primarchs and Legions who so exemplified their roles, who could be depended on to perform it no matter what, that Guilliman felt he could win any war beside them. And this respect is exemplified 10,000 years later, when Guilliman himself would bow before Logan Grimnar, on Guilliman's visit to Fenris. An inconceivable thought in truth. And there's even a moment where Guilliman, heading into battle, almost jovially reflects on Russ punching him to the floor for not laughing at his joke. And so you do kind of get the feeling that, yes, Guilliman had absolute respect for Russ back in the day, despite their very stark differences. But it's also quite possibly a case of not having Russ around now that makes Guilliman appreciate what the Wolf King was all the more. Now on to Rogal Dorn, This one is pretty straightforward. Guilliman had a huge amount of respect for Rogal, and a personal fondness for his brother too. In the Unremembered Empire, Guilliman would remark that he would gladly anoint Rogal as Emperor of Imperium Secundus, selflessly following him, placing him up alongside Sanguinius in his estimation, which is a very profound compliment. And we know this is a respect returned, with Rogal stating he is Lord Commander of the Imperium in Roboute's absence. And Rogal refuses to entertain the notion of Roboute turning traitor also. So it's a very clear, straightforward respect and friendship between the two, which is no wonder when you see so many similarities between them. In No Fear, we have the comment of Rogal being a brother Guilliman counts as a friend. Fewer still like him. As friends, he counts only Dorn, Ferrus, Sanguinius and Horus. Now, while it would later be clear the likes of Corax were also friends with Guilliman, shown in later installments of the Heresy, the statement about Rogal still stands. Guilliman had huge respect for Rogal, and saw him as a genuine friend. All really compounding the shame their relationship would degrade so badly during the years of the Scouring, the argument and disagreement over the Codex, taking them both to the brink of civil war. Though we don't quite know what their relationship will be like in the end, the fact that Guilliman still speaks highly of Rogal after surely speaks for itself. Now on to Konrad Curze. I think Guilliman's opinion of Konrad is largely one of pity, remarking within Dark Imperium Plague War, I think perhaps only poor Konrad knew, for he too had the power to see the future. The Night Haunter, Sulemania whispered. Guilliman nodded. Was he as gifted as they say the Angel was? He was, said Guilliman. He was also insane. Maybe if he had not been, this could all have been avoided. Now to me that's got definite sounds of regret and pity there. Of course, back during the days of the Crusade, Guilliman had huge distaste for Konrad's method of war, his massacres. The two couldn't have had any less in common between them, so they most certainly weren't friends, and I dare say Guilliman had little respect for him. And the heresy would only drive them on to hatred. But I think it's that reflection later, within the Dark Imperium trilogy, that stands out for me. That pity, that sorrow. Again, no, Guilliman didn't appear to feel that during the days of the Great Crusade. None of the Primarchs did. But as they say, hindsight's 20/20. And it's how Guilliman feels now that matters for me. And the final Primarch for Part 1, the Angel Sanguinius. I think we all know the answer to this one. I mean, come on. He asked the Angel to be the Emperor for crying out loud. Guilliman not only classed Sanguinius as one of his true friends, but he also had high respect for him. There's really no example higher than the placing of Sanguinius as the Emperor of Imperium Secundus, which was in reality Ultramar, Guilliman's own home. So there is no debate about this one. Guilliman loved the Angel, as did so many of his brothers. If we really need any more confirmation, again within No Fear, Guilliman names the Angel as one of his few true friends. But okay, that rounds out Part 1. The first half of the Primarchs down, the second half to come next. As always everyone, what do you think? Are you surprised with Guilliman's opinions on some of his brothers? Or do you disagree with some as I view them? Do you view them differently? As always everyone, leave your thoughts in the comments below. Huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. If you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.